World Championship Wreckage, presenting wrestling the way you remember it.
Saludos, my saludos. Me llamo XLJLOG, por favor. And welcome to another episode of World Championship Wreckage. As you can see, I am joined by my other brother from another mother. That's right, I'm declaring it tonight, Will. The Will Gray. How you doing, buddy?
I think first and foremost, your Spanish is muy bueno.
Oh,
And,
gracias.
Muy bueno, and Dad hat's looking a little weird tonight.
Yeah, just a little bit.
We're a little weird and a little crippled.
Oh, not even 2 minutes into the fucking show, and we're already getting the wheelchair show.
I see what you did there.
We are also joined by the wrestling encyclopedia himself, one Michael J. Duplessis. How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you guys? Glad to be on Wreckage. It's been a while.
Yes, it's been a minute. Yeah, and this is a great episode for you to be on. And I gotta admit, gentlemen, I thought I could do the show, but I'm gonna have to take the mask off.
So, listen, while you say that and you pull yours off, I will take this opportunity as someone who has also attempted to do a podcast in a luchador mask, and it's like hot as shit. So
it's fucking hard, dude.
I will applaud these dudes that go out there and do 30, 40, 60-minute bangers in a mask, because it's a different kind of hot when you're wearing a mask that covers your whole face like that. Fuck that.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, kudos to them. But we got a fun episode here this week on Wreckage. I got the privilege of getting to choose the topic, and so excited to talk about this because we are going to talk about one of the most influential pay-per-views that you probably don't even know about. We are talking about Triple A's When Worlds Collide. Before we get too deep in this topic, I want to ask both you guys, what was your first experience watching this pay-per-view?
Wills, you can go first.
I bought a VHS tape of it at a video store at this in this town that my grandparents have a beach house at. In the pro wrestling section. I was in elementary school. I was like, oh, there's WCW on the cover. I'm gonna watch this. And yeah, it was one of my first lucha libre experiences as a kid.
Nice. Will, what about you, buddy?
For me, you guys know I'm slightly younger than Dirt. I'm an old geezer. So I grew up in the mid 90s. You know, I was hitting that. You know, I was a teenager in the late 90s. So, you know, when the Lucha Libre invasion happened, I was 9, 10, 11 years old at this point. So I remember it well. I don't remember this pay-per-view, though, as a kid. I remember right after Tony Khan coined that stupid door, the forbidden door, or the stupid phrase, the forbidden door. I was like, wrestling companies have been doing this the whole time, and that's always been my standpoint on it. And what led to that was in 2022, I've got it pulled up. I sent it to you guys earlier today. I wrote an article about it for the Sportster, no free shout outs, about how
I didn't realize you wrote this article. I just thought you were sending an article.
It's beautiful, by the way. Beautiful.
Thank you. When I wrote it, it was WCW and AAA When Worlds Collide, a forgotten forbidden door, because at that point everybody was saying like Tony Khan's changing wrestling, and I respect TK for having open working relationships, but this has been happening so often throughout wrestling history, and this was one of the most influential reasons. And as we get through the card, my 2 cents as we go through will be explaining that this is one of those situations where it's not necessarily the impact this pay-per-view had, it's the impact that came out of the careers from the people who worked this card. And you'll see when we get there what I mean by that.
Oh, yeah. 10,000%, my friend. Well, I have a fun story on how I discovered this show. And Will, you're going to love this, buddy, because it all goes back to tape trading, baby.
Fuck yes.
Best thing to do in the 90s. Y'all don't even know. You don't even know how fun fucking tape trading is. And one of the best things with tape trading was when there was something on a tape that you weren't aware of. And that's exactly what happened to me. Because let me just take you back in a time machine, folks, okay? So when you would record stuff off TV in your VCR, you had different modes you can choose, you know? So you had your SP, your LP, and your SLP. Now, SLP would get you your longest period of time on your VHS tape. It would get you about 6 hours. Unless you were really fancy and you had an 8-hour tape, then you were the king shit. But I digress. So I traded with this guy of mine because I really wanted to see, of all things, Starrcade 94. Like, what could I say? I still love WCW, even though I hated fucking Hogan, but, you know, I wanted to see it, you know, because I wasn't about to pay for that shit. So, anyways, I traded with my friend, and I turned it on. I put the tape in, turn it on. And it's on Starrcade 94. I'm like, what is this? And literally, for the next 2.5 hours, my mind would be blown and trance as I was introduced for the first time ever to the world of lucha libre. And holy shit, like I didn't even remember like Starrcade, you know. It was like all I can remember was just like, yo, what's this? And then just I can remember like trying to do my due diligence to like deep dive on lucha libre, you know. And this is back before like the internet was really a thing and stuff. So, you know, I'm constantly looking through like the wrestler and PWI and stuff for like results and stuff like this, you know. But to me, that's how I first saw this show. And like I say, it just blew my mind. It's fascinating to me, the origins of how this all came to be. And Will, if you don't mind, because I mean your article was so like precise on the point, could you give us a little bit of a backstory of how this all began with AAA and this show?
I'm pretty much gonna paraphrase what I wrote. I had an opportunity. I got to talk to one Eric Bischoff off the record. He told me he had done 1 million interviews about this. He didn't want to sit down for another hour, but he would kind of chat with me for a little bit and answer some of my questions about it. You got to keep in mind as well, in 1994, we're at the very starting point of AAA. When you think about Antonio Pena starting AAA in Mexico, this isn't a WWF versus WCW thing. This would be if Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon, or no, a better example would be Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. Instead of Vince Jr. buying the company, he leaves and starts the competition against his dad. That's essentially what happened with CMLL and AAA. CMLL wanted to stay the more traditional route. They wanted to keep it in the homegrown lucha libre style. When Antonio Pena started AAA, he wanted to take it. When Antonio Pena started AAA, he wanted to take it more pop culture. He wanted to make it more present the way it is in the US, a little bit more entertainment filled versus the traditional lucha libre. And that's where Eric Bischoff comes in, because Eric Bischoff was like, I think there's something we could do with these wrestlers. I think there's something we could do with this style, because up until that point, and coming from somebody who, like XLJ up above me, was talking about tape trading, there wasn't a whole lot of lucha libre before that 1994 range. So essentially, Eric Bischoff teamed with Antonio Pena. They paired up to find a city in the States to host it. They decided on Los Angeles because of the big Latino population and everything that's represented there. And what they essentially got was a AAA pay-per-view, mass-produced for the world, produced and edited by WCW. But this is the catch, because on the card itself, at the time, there wasn't a single WCW competitor. It was nothing but AAA and another small independent, the IWC. And I said in the article, not the crazy, pitchforked fans on the internet. But that was essentially it. You had AAA, a budding upstart promotion in Mexico. You had WCW fighting with the WWE to eventually become that number one. And then you had the IWC, which was ran, essentially, it was an independent. It was a guy who loved wrestling. He was a lawyer, and they came together to produce this show in Los Angeles. And that's how we got there. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. You had WCW wanting to expose the world to Lucha Libre, and Eric Bischoff was the catalyst. And there's somebody there in this story that I love. The most interesting fact of it all is Konnan. And people don't realize how important Konnan was to getting Lucha Libre into the U.S. He's in the main event of this card, so when we get there, we'll talk about it. But he was maybe the most instrumental person in making this pay-per-view happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you gotta keep in mind, folks. I mean, Konnan at this time frame had been like literally the face of Lucha Libre. I mean, he was everywhere. I mean, Konnan was on the equivalent of what would you compare it to today? Like, you could say he was like a Roman Reigns of Mexico, essentially. I mean, he was like a John Cena. Yeah. I mean, that he was
very much
he was
John
the guy.
Cena.
The perfect example to put it is The Outsiders. Okay? When AAA started and Konnan left CMLL, he took Rey and he took Psychosis and he took Bar and then eventually Eddie. And it was a lot of these guys, and it was the young up-and-comers that wanted to evolve Lucha Libre, and not to sound harsh, the older, more traditional guys stayed back in CMLL. And what you don't realize happened was these AAA guys, Ray talks about it in one of his docs, and a bunch of them say it, they essentially got blackballed from Mexican wrestling. If they weren't wrestling for AAA, they weren't getting booked because the guys in CMLL pretty much ran it. You know what I mean? Like I said, you do Vince's dad wrong, you didn't get booked in the New York territory. You do CMLL wrong, you're not getting booked anywhere. So these guys moved to Mexico City and started AAA and started competing. And this was a catalyst to really get them on the map.
Yeah, I think that's a huge factor about this whole story as well, is the fact that, this was a massive gamble on those guys' behalf, and the fact that, they're going up against such a well-established company as a CMLL. I mean, it's just when you look back on it, it truly is awe-inspiring. And you have that phrase thrown around a lot, truly ahead of its time. But I mean, AAA and what they were doing and them pulling this off was truly ahead of its time.
Will, would you say this was the first major exodus from one company to the next? Because I know you see some in New Japan and All Japan later. Would you say this was the first major exodus?
I would probably say in the Lucha Libre world, outside of the CMLL AAA split, the guys leaving AAA to come to the States to go to ECW, WCW, all of that, absolutely. I would say next to that would have been the Black Saturday debacle, when Vince went through and bought up all those TV spots and rosters and then sucked everybody dry. I would say that was more of a forced exodus. A lot of those guys didn't have any say in it, but so it's a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison in that. But yeah, this was a huge one because Eric did very Paul Heyman, very Vince things here, because he brought these guys in, he got them exposure, he got them over into the States, and then 80% of the guys we're going to talk about either signed with ECW or WCW after this show within a year or two. Think about it. This is 94. That Halloween Havoc 96 match with Eddie and Rey or whatever, or 96 or 97? 97. Yeah. So we're 3 years removed from that. So from where we're at talking about this pay-per-view 3 years later, we have the two biggest cruiserweights in the world who are both on this card. You see what I mean? Like in such a short amount of time, what explodes because this show happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the aftermath is phenomenal, and we're definitely going to get there and talk about that. But one thing that always fascinated me about this show, and you said it, Will, as far as them choosing location. I mean, Los Angeles was the perfect place for this, because you literally sell the place out. The Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena. You have 13,000 people on hand for this show. Like, I don't know the true numbers in comparison to, like, if you look at like a WrestleMania 7, which was there, in 91. But I mean, this outdrew that essentially. I mean, they outdrew WrestleMania, folks. Like, that's how big of a moment and a big of a card this is. Let's talk about the stories going into When Worlds Collide, because without a shadow of a doubt, the dominating factor going into this show was the dominance of the Rudos group, Los Gringos Locos. They were running roughshod over AAA. It's fascinating how the origin stories of how this all began essentially with them, because you have the tag team of La Para Atomicos, or the Atomic Team of Eddie Guerrero, teaming up with El Hijo del Santo. But in real life, there was some heat between those two guys backstage, so they didn't quite get along. And then along comes, you see it on Mike's thing here, one of the all-time greats, Art Barr, comes along, kind of like the little devil on Eddie's shoulder, getting in his ears, just like, you know what, you're better than him. You're carrying his ass. You don't need to be teaming with him. And also, too, you gotta take a look at both Eddie and Santo, both of their fathers, huge Lucha Libre stars in the world of Lucha Libre,
and a great tag team,
too. Yeah. So it's just fascinating to me, like, how that all came to be. But you got to talk about here too, what I think really put Los Gringos Locos truly, like, over the top here as a dominant faction is Konnan joining up with them. Because as we said, Konnan was the white meat babyface. You know, everybody here recently talking about the John Cena heel turn and stuff. I mean, that was that. But like, Konnan heel turn back in the day, man, that was monumental when he turned against his mentor Perro Aguayo. Oh man,
yes.
And then,
so what a lot of people don't talk about is this group in '93 and who the original leader was. Because the original leader is the one, Jake the Snake Roberts.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
he had a hell of a run in AAA.
Yeah, in his feud with Aguayo and Konnan, and the matches him and Konnan had for like a year and a half, in like late '92 all the way through '93.
To kind of put it, go ahead, Will.
My favorite Paraguayo fact is that when you go back into the muddled history of the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship, Paraguayo is the inaugural Light Heavyweight Champion, and then that title gets tossed around between AAA and a few places in Mexico, and then it ends up in Taka Michinoku's promotion, and then, long story short, ends up on the arm of the Ultimo Dragon in WCW. So if you think about it in a long ways, like Paraguayo, he's not one of those guys you really think about. He's like, what's the dude's name? I can never remember. He's in the NBA. He's got like 10 titles because he just team hopped and was like the sixth man off the bench everywhere ever played.
Robert
And
Horry.
I'm like, that's kind of Paraguayo. He was like a tag champion, a mid-card champion. He had his fingerprints all over the world of wrestling without ever being the face of wrestling in the States. But he was very important in Mexico. He was very important in the States without ever being the guy, because he was hyper-focused in that light heavyweight scene in the 90s, helping bring over into the WWF, because at that point, they didn't really give a shit about light heavyweights, because Vince was always a body guy until the end of it. So it was like, again, so much ripple effects from this show and the people that are on this card. So, sorry. I keep taking it and running.
No, please. I love here because it's fun for me because it's somebody who is just as enthusiastic as us, about because I mean, this show it's so good. It's so fucking good. Oh Man, and you know what? It's crazy to me too, Will, is how like going into this, they was really kind of met with a little bit of a handicap by the fact that this was like WCW produced the show, because I mean there was a lot of stuff going on here where like you didn't get like a true authentic, I would say, like as far as from a rule set and presentation with Lucha Libre. Because you know some of the matches got cut down because traditionally speaking back in this time, you know, we're talking like 2 out of 3 falls essentially in these matches, and it was just like cut for time. Originally, craziness is, I can't even imagine this, but originally the semi-main event, they wanted that to be a one-on-one with Eddie going up against his former partner El Hijo del Santo, which I can't even fathom like that match not taking place, because I mean that's definitely the match everybody talks about the most on this show. That being said, though, gentlemen, let's kind of get right into it here, because this show, I think what's great about it is you see so many great stars up and coming in the world of Lucha Libre who we get to see for the first time ever really to an American audience, but you also are introduced to the world of Lucha Libre, which if you're not familiar with, which a lot of people weren't at this time frame, which I've always often said, like, wrestling to me is like downright romantic, and one of the classic styles of all professional wrestling is Lucha Libre, just with everything, just how you have your rudos, your technicos. I mean, the origin stories of the mask and just the importance of that and stuff. It's just like, it's beautiful. It is truly one of the greatest art forms in the world today. I don't care what anybody says.
I agree. And one thing I talked to, I want to say it was Crowbar, because we talked when Dad and I had him on here, and I've had him on Botch Spots with me. He talked about how in wrestling there's so many different styles. It's like dance almost, like ballroom and then swing dancing and jazz and tap.
Yeah.
And wrestling is the exact same way, because you've got Lucha Libre, you've got strong style, you've got British strong style, you've got, you know, traditional American wrestling with a capital R. You've got West Coast pop now, you know what I mean, with the high flying, like Lucha Libre blended with American style. Like there's so many different types of dance in the wrestling world. And that's one of my favorite analogies. And XLJ, one of my favorite things about you, brother, is your love for it, because I felt the same way when I found this. I was like, holy shit, there's so much cool stuff about these different styles of wrestling. That's how I felt when I found Japanese wrestling and FMW and some of the deathmatch stuff. I was like, we don't get that here. You know, like that was that feeling. So yes, harping everything you're saying.
And just the presentation of it too, because I mean it's just like you turn it, like I said, I can remember when this first, like, you know, you get the opening package and then it shows the arena and it's like, holy shit, man, like this is just like something I would see here, you know, in America. And yes, I know the show's in America, but still though, just it's just, to me at the time, like a 10-year-old seeing this, I'm just like, whoa, what is this?
The crowd was different in that show, and it showed, and it gave off a way greater presentation than what you were really getting in '94.
That crowd was a phenomenal too. Like
they were red hot.
They were great. They was so like, and that's part of what made the show, man. Also, I want to give a huge shout out and kudos to the English announce team, Chris Cruz and Mike Tenay, man. They knocked it out of the park. Fucking, I've always been a big Chris Cruz fan. I tell you, as a kid growing up, I loved watching WCW Pro at 9:05 a.m. on Saturdays. Watched the shit out of that. That was some Saturday morning cartoons, and then over to 9:05 to TBS to watch some WCW Pro, baby.
And this was the first time
you guys.
What?
I'm thinking about it. Okay, I'm looking at it right now. The undercard of this event, you had Rod Radford, ECW guy. You had Psychosis, WCW, ECW. You had Rey Mysterio. You had territory guys like Too Cold Scorpio and Tito Santana, who had both had runs in WWE and WCW. Like, you had so many names on your card. Was this is one of those like walk so they could, they crawled so they could walk situations, or they walked so they could run, or whatever cheesy analogy you wanted to use here. Did super shows like this start so that we could have eventually get to something like All in 2018?
Yes. Oh, 100%. I think
you know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like small promotions like a Ring of Honor, this is a AAA coming in, having people book them and back them because they know they can draw, they can put butts in seats. That's Eric Bischoff and Tony Khan, and all the synonyms, the parallels, the things that are happening here. Was this the first super show? You know what I mean? And there have been other super shows like Korea and stuff like that. Was this the first American super indie?
That's a great question.
I don't think I can think of one beforehand that would have been like this. That would have
In
had
America,
this style
yes.
of wrestling, like this style of stuff. Was this the first super indie show where you had big name signed talent coming back because you had your Tito's and your Two Cold Scorpios? You also had your up and comers. You had your fucking Konnans. You had your your Art Bars and your Eddie Guerreros that were like the big stars too. Like, was this the first indie super show in the States?
I think you can easily stake that claim for sure. I mean, you could say technically there's other companies that weren't Crockett or WWF that, ran shows. You look all the way back in the 80s with like, AWA running Super Clash, or you could even talk about the god-awful UWF show in like 91 or whatever it was. But I mean, those shows really kind of failed for the most part. Not this show. Like this show is a love letter to lucha libre, and it introduced the rest of the world pretty much to it. So I think what you're saying is I 100% agree. I think this is the first real impactful that showed you like, okay, it doesn't have to be one of these two big promotions. You can get a hell of a fucking show from top to bottom, in ring, with the presentation, with the quality of everything. And this show shows it.
Yes.
And to get back to the ring announcers, as we were talking about earlier, this is the first time we see Mike Tenay.
Yeah. Which is crazy to think. Like Mike Tenay, a staple in WCW and TNA.
And I remember, like, Mike Tenay was the reason I started to like really wanted to learn about pro wrestling history, because he just knew everything. I was like, I want to be that guy. So he's actually like a huge influence for me. So it was cool to actually see like his first show as like an announcer in the States.
And I mean, Mike Tenay in WCW, it was all you watch. If you go back and watch WCW, doesn't matter if it's Nitro, Thunder, pay-per-view, whatever, they do the cruiserweight matches. Who they put on commentary? Mike Tenay he was the cruiserweight guy. He was the international wrestling savant, like the guy, So kudos to him. And I really want to give flowers to Chris Cruz on this show too, as well. Because like I say, I'm a huge Chris Cruz fan. Always have been. I don't think that man got nearly enough love as he should have, with respect. But he's a great color commentator. But this show, I would dare say, is probably his piece de resistance as far as like color commentary for anything. And they do such a wonderful job of explaining the stories and kind of filling us in like why this is important, because that was key. That was key because we're coming into this and we don't know what the hell's going on really. We just are like, what's this, So kudos to them. But let's run down the card here, gentlemen. So a total of 5 matches, which I know doesn't sound like a lot. And originally they were going to be more matches, but once again, due to WCW kind of wanting to keep this below a 3-hour show. There you go. But you kick it off with the minis, if you will. You have Mascarada Sagrada and Octagon Sicta going up against Espectacle and Jerito Estrada, which I'm sure I probably butchered those names. I do apologize in advance. But interesting that they kicked it off with the minis, but I think was very wise, because I mean, this is the minis or little people, whatever you want to call it. Trying to be as politically correct here as possible, but they were a huge part of lucha libre. So to kind of show you like the style of what you're gonna see, you know, because this isn't. I'm sorry, like this isn't like, you know, watching like Skylo Low or something, or like Little Beaver or something. This is a little bit a lot more advanced than that. Guys, what do you think of the opening contest on this show?
It was it's not a spectacle in the way you would think Andre the Giant.
Right.
This was almost like this was part of a lucha libre show.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch lucha libre today, they still have matches like this. They have things where they have guys who cosplay as superheroes and do like they mimic comic book fights and stuff. Like a lucha libre show is an entire experience, and that's one of the things Triple H did separately than CMLL. CMLL, very traditional, very tight-laced, you know, like you were talking about. They were very cut and dry with how they did their wrestling. AAA wanted to make it more of an experience, and this was one of those experiences of watching a AAA show. When you would get there and you would see it, they would have these matches and they would have comedic relief, and one of the most important things that you would get here is that you would see a tornado tag match. And we see every single match on this card, essentially, and the American fans don't realize that a tornado tag match originates from Lucha Libre, because a lucha tag match, you don't have to make tags. It's 4 men or 6 men in the ring all the time until somebody gets a pinfall or a submission. And that's a little cool piece of tidbit from this information, is because a lot of American fans watching these 4-man and 6-man and 8-man tag matches or whatever on this card realize a tornado tag match, which we had only seen a handful of times, is really just a lucha libre match without the flips, because, you know, we're Americans.
America. You know, it's interesting too. The timing of this is perfect too, because we, if you watched Monday Night Raw this past week at the time of this recording, they literally just had a tornado tag match with the New Day going up against Dragon Lee and Rey Mysterio. And so it's and I loved how on commentary Michael Cole was kind of acknowledging the lucha libre aspects of that. But great opener, like I say, and it was great showcase of the maze. And a lot of times, like Will's saying too, the kind of comedic relief, you would see them a lot of times they would be portraying like their counterparts, like of other wrestlers, of course regular sized wrestlers too. And you know, if you watched the WWF back in the day too, you got to see, you know, some of these wrestlers on there periodically every now, especially when they were in like a Texas area and whatnot of doing shows. So.
Well, they did it in, I think it was the Royal Rumble 97 when they had them. That was one of the few times that WWE had AAA involved with them and stuff, because they had Lucha Libre representation, and they had the, you know, the little people. Sorry. I don't know, but the best part about this was these guys are there for the comedic relief, but they can freaking work.
Yeah, they're athletic as hell.
They're doing moonsaults, they're doing hurricanranas, they're going out there and doing planches and stuff, but they're doing it at their speed and their size, and they do it with that comedic flair to where you're like, I see what's entertaining about this. It's the same reason, again, a crawl so somebody could walk. This kind of stuff happened so that way the Big Little Brawlers could have a show on TLC now. You know what I mean? That's the perfect, this happened so that this could happen later. If it wasn't for the little people in the AAA starting the shows and being there to be that part, Big Little Brawlers wouldn't be what it is today. These things happen in wrestling at one point so future generations can experience, you know, what we have now. That's what I'm here for, guys. I'm always going to figure out a way to connect old shit to new shit. That's what I'm good at.
That's what we do. I love it. Let's talk about our second matchup on this week. So we go into a 6-man tag as we have the team of Fuerza Guerrero, Madonna's boyfriend, Psychosis, going up against Heavy Metal, Latin Lover, and for the first time, we would see Rey Mysterio Jr. This is a great matchup, like a showcase of just all the different talent. I mean, think of so many. It's fascinating too because they did this a lot there too, where they teamed up the more established talent with the young up and coming talent. Like you look at that team that's with Psychosis, up and coming. Madonna's boyfriend. Now, for those of you at home who don't know who that is in fact the late great Louis Spicolli, who, by the way, was phenomenal in AAA too. Like the stuff he did there was so good,
so great.
And of course, they're quote unquote, you could say, the captain of the team, the veteran, one Fereza Guerrero, and yes, that is in fact the father of one Juventud Guerrero. And going up, like I say, going up against heavy metal, Latin lover, kind of like two of the. I'd say those guys were some Lotharios, if you will, of Lucha Libre. Definitely, I think wasn't Latin lover? Didn't he start off originally as like a male stripper?
Yeah, he was a male stripper for like almost a decade before he got into the business.
Yeah. And then you see this young kid. I mean, how old was Rey Mysterio at the time of this match? Was he probably like
18, 19 years old?
19, something like that? I mean, as the popular saying goes, he's just a baby. Rey Mysterio.
He was. That's one of those situations where he like lied about his age when he was in Mexico. So when he got to the States, like he was legit still a kid. And going back again to his A&E biography, he talked about it. His parents were pissed that he was leaving to go to the States so young come the end of 94, 95 when he gets up here, because he was still late teens, early 20s. Like, it was a lot of risks being taken. Him and Konnan, everybody who jumped over and came to WCW and ECW, they were all risking it for the biscuit, as they say, because one, entertainers' visas are fucking expensive. Two, you've already been blackballed for leaving CMLL and starting AAA, so you already have trouble finding work. So if you come over here and you're a bust, going back to Mexico, you only have one option too. Like, this was the epitome of what it means to be in a sink or swim situation for a lot of these guys, and to see where Rey Mysterio has come from to go on and now where he's at now to be an active wrestler who got inducted to the Hall of Fame while he's still active tells you everything he's ever done. And I stand 10 toes down on this. He's the greatest luchador to ever do it, only because Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr both passed away too young. I think Eddie and Art stayed alive and we're still wrestling till 2025. It would be a three-way dance for the greatest luchador to ever do it.
I was watching this match earlier, and I got goosebumps when Cruz said Rey Mysterio is going to be someone you see in the next 20 to 30 years, because it's like, damn, he was right.
Spot on.
It's been 30 years.
It. The equivalent of Babe Ruth calling his shot, man. Like freaking Chris Cruz calls it like he sees it. My God, though, this match, it's just fun. It is fun. Like, this was like, the opener was great, but this one right here, though, you're just like, yo, okay, I'm hooked. This is something different.
This was the first Lucha Libre match. The first match was the icebreaker to get everybody excited, to get them laughing and cheering and having fun. And then these guys came out and stole the show. This was the Lucha Libre jumping off the top rope for the fans, because you got they got their shit in. You saw what it means to be a Lucha Libre wrestler.
Yeah. This just so much. And you know, also getting to see a guy like Psychosis. And I mean, Psychosis and Rey Mysterio, oh my God, the matches they would have throughout the years, holy crap. And the thing is, like, Psychosis coming up at the same time, really, as Rey Mysterio.
They started together?
I was going to say, I think they were in the same training camp together.
They trained together.
Yeah. Just the stuff they were able to do, but, like, incredible 6-man tag match. The match only goes, it's less than 13 minutes. It's like, but damn, it's so good. It is so good. As we move on, gentlemen, to our next matchup here, we get another 6-man tag. And this one is being billed as the IWC versus AAA. And there's some familiar faces here to the North American, or at least to the American audience, that is. As you have Tito Santana who's actually wrestling in his first pay-per-view outside of the WWF ever, which is
He had
crazy to think.
just left the company like maybe 4 or 5 months earlier.
So you have Tito Santana teaming up with Too Cold Scorpio, who a lot of us knew from WCW at the time, as well as, at this time too, he's working in ECW. And the Pegasus Kid, of course, the Pegasus Kid would be one Chris Benoit. And this is before Benoit ever truly had worked in the States, really. And they are going up against the team of Blue Panther, Jerry Estrada, and the chairman himself, La Parca. What was interesting about this one going into it from a storyline perspective is La Parca and Jerry Estrada fucking hated each other. Like they had
fun fact, they were going into a rivalry for the National Light Heavyweight Championship.
Yeah.
I didn't know if y'all, so it's like I
read
into it his
but it's like they're paired up together to be representing to AAA, essentially, to go up against the IWC. And it's interesting, like, because the aftermath of this is you get La Parca actually ends up turning into a I can't speak, to a babyface, essentially, after this. Because at this point, La Parca had been working a heel for the most part, I believe, throughout his tenure there in Mexico. But
his
like I said,
mask that he came out with, like the big mask, was something I wish he would have kept in WCW. Like, that thing was cool. To
this day, I love a lot of different like luchadors masks, but La Parca's my favorite.
He's up there.
That's my favorite mask.
Same. But the Day of the Dead, like, big mask that he took off to reveal his actual mask was fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts about this match is, and I couldn't talk about it in the article, but I'm going to pull that curtain all the way back for you guys. Sportstar had a very strict rule, and you'll be amazed how many places have a very strict rule about this. You're not allowed to talk about one Chris Benoit in any form or fashion. They don't want you to write about him or talk about him, even if his matches are on the card. We're not allowed to write about those matches because we don't want they don't want their articles to show up in searches for his name. You know what I mean? Wow. So I had to leave this match essentially completely out. But one of the best things about this match was, I talked about it at the very beginning, was how it was the three-way dance between ICW and AAA and WCW, or IWC rather. But the thing to remember about it is, this was the perfect example of what it meant to see someone watch, because the first match was the entertainment, hey, we're here, get the crowd popping. Second match was, this is lucha libre. The third match essentially came down to, how does lucha libre blend with the American wrestling you guys know? And what you saw here was the struggle of a Pegasus Kid trying to figure out how to keep these guys grounded. It was these technical wrestlers trying to figure out how to slow the lucha libre down to their level, and then they had to figure out how to speed theirs up to match it. And it was this perfect blend. And this is me going, well, we'd see a lot of it in a couple of years, because when they would get the ECW a few years later, you would see the likes of Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and some of these guys having some of the most technical matches in ECW, because Paul Heyman knew what these guys could do because he watched them wrestle in '94. So this is one of those things where people don't like to talk about it because Benoit's in the match. But again, looking at what ECW did with the Lucha Libre, blending it with the technical Dean Malenkos and Chris Benoit's of the world, happened because of what we saw at this show. This was that catalyst, and I said it, the ripple point of so much. Pegasus Kid versus Psychosis was that breaking point that eventually gave us Chris Benoit versus Eddie Guerrero in ECW.
Yeah. Facts. Absolutely, man. And it was what I thought was fascinating about it too. Like you hit the nail on the head, is about a clash of styles essentially in this matchup. And also the fact that it's okay. And once again, we'll just piggyback off what you said. You started off with kind of like, okay, this little appetizer, if you will, with the minis. Then you start getting into the main course, and it's just like, oh my god, the second match is incredible. This match, it's like, okay, you know what? This could work in America, essentially, because I mean they're going against guys like, I mean, Tito Santana, like one of the most established stars in the WWF in the 80s and 90s, you know, and Too Cold Scorpio and his style and what all he can do, and of course Pegasus Kid or Chris Benoit. But yeah, this was another great, tremendous matchup. Like, just like as the kids say, banger after banger. But as great as that was, it's all about the double main event, folks. And this semi-main event, it is by far the match that people talk the most about on this show, and rightfully so. Because to me, as great as everything is on this show, this to me is the most lucha libre match on this show. This is you getting a taste of that world, and it's just like you want more and more and more of it. And we are talking about the tag team matchup, the 2 out of 3 falls with the double mask versus double hair match with Octagon and El Hijo del Santo going up against Art Bar and Eddie Guerrero. Gentlemen, this matchup, my God. Let's talk about the importance there of the mask and the hair. How this was such a, I mean, these types of matches, you had championships in Lucha Libre, but these were bigger. These transcended championship matches. These were the top match you could get in Lucha Libre.
This was a blow off. This was bigger than a blow off. This was the Lucha Libre Hell in a Cell, essentially. Like, if you got to where somebody was at risk of losing their mask or their hair, and keep in mind, in Lucha Libre, if you didn't have a mask in the 80s and early 90s, you had a big long mullet. You know what I mean? Like, they went one hand in hand. So the idea was, it was Samson. If you lost your hair or you lost your mask, it was over. And for a lot of these Lucha Libre wrestlers, this was their swan song in a lot of ways, because they would do a mask versus hair mask, or mask versus hair match, or something similar to this at the end of their career, because that's how big and important these matches were to Lucha Libre. So you're absolutely right. The titles meant something. But in traditional Lucha Libre and Mexican wrestling, a mask versus hair, or hair versus hair, or mask versus mask, these were the biggest matches in Lucha Libre. Absolutely. Yeah. And 2 out of 3 falls, featuring your 2 hottest tag teams, featuring 2 of the people I stand on business who would have been the 2 biggest Lucha Libre stars to ever do it, in Eddie Guerrero and Art Bar. Like, this was the creme de la creme. This was also the 5-star match from Uncle Dave Smeltzer. Right here for you in Los Angeles, gave this match 5 stars for what it's worth. Like, back when Dave's opinion actually mattered.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
I have a friend of mine was asking me how important losing a mask was in Lucha Libre, because he's getting into it. And I told him, and I had to give him an analogy because of way he lives his life and who he hangs out with. I was like, losing your mask in Lucha Libre is like getting in a fight in the street and then getting your ass kicked, and then your girl living with the guy that kicked your ass.
Touche, my friend. That is, it really is. All the combatants in this match is incredible. And I it's so good, folks. Like, it's so good. To tell you how good it is, my honest opinion, outside of Eddie versus Rey from Halloween Havoc, I think this is Eddie Guerrero's best match, second best match in my opinion. And he's had a lot of great ones, but that's how much I love this match. But that being said, he, in my opinion, and you gentlemen may or may not agree with me on this, he's not the star of this. If you had anybody to pick out the star of this, it's fucking Art Bar. Because
Mr. Springfield, Oregon. Sorry, you know how I feel about Art. Yeah. I've talked about this man.
We did an episode of Wreckage on this man. Like, folks, we had the big what ifs in pro wrestling. I still say to this day, the biggest what if is what if Art Bar was still with us, because if Art Barr was, he would have been one of the all-time greatest professional wrestlers. Period.
He would have
Period.
been. And I watched an interview or read an interview he did. He was going to make that jump with the rest of the guys in '94. He had done an interview for some wrestling magazine, and he talked about how he was excited to go to Philadelphia because him and Eddie were supposed to tag together. And their first program was supposed to be with the Public Enemy.
God, that would have been so great. Like, but Art Barr is the catalyst of this matchup, if you think, because like I said earlier, he's the devil on Eddie's shoulder, right? So, I mean, he's the one who is really just kind of stirring this shit or whatever. But my God, you watch the physicality of this, and still to this day, and I know you're on my side with this, Mike, the best frog splash anybody's ever done, it's Art Barr's. You've got some great ones. Eddie's is great. Rob Van Dam, whatever. But Art Barr, because I mean, the man, they called it a frog splash for a reason. It looked like he was a fucking frog jumping in the air. It's like, I still to this day have never seen anything like it. It's so
I've gone on record multiple times on TikTok about Art Barr having the best frog splash. I've had to argue with people about him creating the frog splash. That's got most of my views on TikTok is because I fight people for that.
No, 100% is an Art Barr move. He originated that move. They called it a frog splash because XLJ is right, because his gangly ass would jump off the top rope, he would stretch out, and then he would ball up, and then he would come out. And it was the perfect way to do it. And it was like, it wasn't exactly how Eddie did it. It wasn't really a 5-star frog splash. It was Art Barr's frog splash, and that's what made it the best of all time. Is because everybody who's done one since took a little piece of his and made it really good, but nobody's ever been able to do it the same way he did it. And people do pieces of his frog splash, but nobody's been able to do it the right way. Down to the fact, if you watch enough Art Barr matches, the RVD turning in the air and hitting it, Art Barr did that first. He hit that move in the late 80s, early 90s. In Portland, Oregon, Wills, I'll give you your fucking roses. But he came off the top rope and adjusted mid-flight to hit it on somebody at an angle. And I'm like, yeah, RVD's great. But again, Art Barr did it 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Like, cool story, bro.
Yeah. I mean, I will talk about Art Barr for hours and what not only art, but what his family means to the Northwest scene.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And you could totally hear more about that on episode. Like I say, we did hear a Wreckage Gets replay here. Had to get a cheap plug in there for that. But let's talk about this matchup. Let's break it down. So, like, it's 2 out of 3 falls. Now, here's the thing. 2 out of 3 falls in this, we're talking, it's not just like pin one opponent. You got to pin both the opponents to get the fall, essentially. And they came out of the gate. I mean, shit, I think within 5 minutes, I think it was at least, where Eddie and Art pick up the first fall.
3 minutes and 38 seconds.
Just like that. So the Rudos, these bad guys, man, they have the advantage right out of the gate. So you instantly have that, oh shit, how are they going to overcome this? So you mean to tell me that Del Santo and Octagon have to literally pin these guys 4 times essentially to win this damn thing now? It's like, folks, it's the equivalent to being down 3-0 in like a playoff series in like the NBA or in baseball or something. It's what this is. It's like, holy shit, how do you overcome these odds? And of course,
very much Boston Red Sox-esque in 04.
Thank you for the shout out, my friend. Go Sox. That's right. I'm a Sox fan. I said what I said.
Yeah, I forgot you're a Sox fan.
I am. Hey. That's another story for another time. But anyways, we ain't got shit around here for baseball, brother. So we get the series, we get the match tied up essentially, and then we're in this final fall. It's all on the line, folks. It's hair versus mask. It's the reputation of all these men is on the line. And then you have where Octagon goes down. I mean, Octagon gets hit with a pile driver, which was illegal in AAA. That was a big no-no. Of course, I think Art Barr is the one that hit it, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he was.
And then you see Octagon getting taken out of the arena.
Yes.
And here you have El Hijo del Santo, essentially all by himself, against these guys, against Eddie, his former partner, and the man who initially enforced his turn, Art Barr. Like, how can he possibly do this without his partner? Of course, in classic babyface fashion, he rises to the top and is able to pick up the win for his team. And thus, of course, they retain their mask. But now you have Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr who have to get their heads shaved or hair cut in the middle of the ring here. And I just remember the visuals on this too, because like you could tell like legit, and you can still watch this today, just the love between Eddie and Art.
Yeah.
And just like that was one Art Barr. Okay. Go ahead.
When you
Go
talk
ahead,
about
Mike.
the love, and I mean this with no disrespect to Rey Mysterio, because I know how much Eddie means to Rey.
Mm-hmm.
But Art was Eddie's first best friend in this business.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Many people, Chavo even said that. Like, yeah, Eddie and Rey were cool, but Art was his main guy. So yeah, that is a genuine friendship that you definitely see when they're cutting each other's hair.
Oh yeah. But with Art Barr, I was going to say, as great as he was on promos, as great as he was like in ring and the psychology of it, watch his facial expressions, folks. Go back and watch any Art Barr match, and if you look at just the expressions that he makes, like the man doesn't have to say a word. You can see everything. You understand the whole story. You look into his eyes, and you can see. I mean, he just was that talented that he connected with an audience. That's how fucking good Art Barr was, man. But this match, just an incredible matchup. As Will said, a 5-star matchup. If you give a shit about Meltzer, which here's the thing too. Back then, getting 5 stars, it wasn't as much as like Will Ospreay's match of the month. You know, I mean, it was a little bit different system back then. Yeah, there was a lot more that went into getting a 5-star.
It meant something, and I mean that wholeheartedly, because again, the tape trading, let's keep the conversation all tied together. Back in the day, Meltzer's opinion meant something. When he started writing all the way back to 1983, ladies and gentlemen, look it up. Dirt sheets have been around longer than all of us have been, for the most part. Like, Meltzer's been writing for a long time, and there was one point when Meltzer's word meant something before he sold his soul to the wrestling devil. Like, Meltzer's words used to mean something, and a 5-star match meant something, and this was one that deserved it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I just want to bring up the influence of what Gringos Locos had on a future feud. With when it comes to Eddie and Art, if you go back to fast forward to 2004, when Eddie had his feud with JBL, and JBL was trying to figure out how he was going to say all these things to Eddie. Eddie told JBL to watch the stuff that they did promo-wise and work-wise and what they would say in the ring to the Mexican fans during this time. And you got a little bit of it during this match where Art Barr would look in the fountain and he would do that frog splash right before you did the frog splash. He would say American made or made in America. And he would do these little things to piss off the Latino fan base.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, too, got to give him a shout out. We didn't mention this, but the gear, like their gear.
American
iconic.
flag. Yeah.
American, so iconic. So iconic. But as great as that is, gentlemen, let's talk about it. The main event. As Chris Cruz would so elegantly put it, the much-loved Perro Aguaya against the much-hated Konnan. Inside of a steel cage. And I got to say this, when I saw this for the first time, I was like, holy shit, that's a big fucking cage. Like that wasn't like the cage we were used to seeing here, like in the States, folks. Like that was a big cage, man. Like, Will, Can you talk here a little bit about like just the importance of this being as the main event? Like I know you alluded to it earlier with like Konnan and like his impact. Let's talk about it. Like going into this main event.
This was the catalyst. This was the bridge. This was the breaking point of the AAA Lucha Libre scene breaking in, because Perro Aguayo was already established on a worldwide level as being a star. Konnan had just made his heel turn, so he went from being the Mexican wrestling babyface to being the most hated wrestler in the continent, essentially. You had that coming together of those two forces. You had it in the cage for a blow off of who's going to be the face of everything moving forward. And then on top of it, you had Konnan sitting there holding the pencil and helping book AAA with Antonio Pena. And you had the Eric Bischoffs of the world and the Paul Heymans of the world telling Konnan, I can get you money and I can get you fame and I can get you merch deals and TV time. Get you and your boys up here and let's make it happen. And Konnan is going through an emotional struggle right now that he's talked about himself, where do I leave home and everything that I've built for myself in Mexico and roll the dice in the United States? Or do I stay here and continue to ride this wave of what we've got going? His decision to come to the United States will never be fully appreciated, because his decision, if he had stayed, no Psychosis, no Rey, no La Parca, none of these guys, no Art Bars or Eddie Guerreros, like none of these guys would have ever made it to the U.S. scene, because Konnan said, partner with Eric Bischoff. He took the deal to Antonio Pena. It was him who said, this is the guy we need to partner with. They've ran shows here. He was so key and focal in everything that happened that without him, the Lucha Libre invasion would have never happened. He had his fingerprints on everything that led up to this show happening, and he earned the main event spot by carrying AAA up until this point, breaking it over into the main scene, getting it over with the fans. He then, in returns, comes over into the States and has a career that's a mile long. He was a member of the freaking NWO, for crying out loud. Like, this man did everything in the States, and he still has a podcast, and he will still send you direct messages asking you if you listen to his podcast. But
I've got 3 in the last year.
Konnan is one of those guys where he's maybe one of the most underappreciated people in the wrestling world for what he did for the wrestling world.
Facts.
Sorry.
Essentially,
I don't even know if I answered what you wanted me to answer.
No, perfect.
That's why this main event happened. The main event was in itself a fantastic match, everything that it represented, but it was Konnan's swan song and love story for Lucha Libre and Mexican wrestling, because he knew after this everything was going to be different for him and his boys.
Yeah. You said it so eloquently and so perfectly about Konnan. While we're talking about him, gentlemen, I want to throw this at you. Will Konnan be in the Hall of Fame someday?
I hope so.
I feel like it. I want to hope so too. I feel like it's definitely well deserved. I mean, for his outside of his body of work that he did here in the States, like you said, I mean, he was a pioneer. Like if it's like you say, if we don't get Konnan making this big of a move, like we don't have all these stars that you mentioned. I mean, for God's sakes, you go back to Rey Mysterio's Hall of Fame induction. Who put him in?
Yeah,
it was Konnan, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
But this match is awesome, man. It's just a bloodbath. Like, Perro Aguayo bleeds buckets in this damn thing. Like, it's just like, it's so much blood. And I can tell you, because 10-year-old XLJ was just like blown away by this matchup. Just like, holy shit. Like, this is the cherry on top. It's like, it's the piece de resistance. This is just like, yo, like, incredible wrestling unlike I've ever seen before. and this bloodbath of a cage match. It's like this is my jam. I need lucha libre in my life. I can remember this, Will, like after this, dude, like I can remember like we had a local channel here, Channel 3, and they would air, it was like local access TV, but they like every in the mornings and then every Saturday and I think it was Sunday on the weekends, they would put out a feed of like Telemundo. And like I can remember like seeing some lucha libre, and I was just like, I mean, I couldn't understand what the announcers were saying, but I was just like, all right, let's go. I know this is gonna be some good shit. So, oh man, but this main event, like, it's so good, and it just such a great way to end the show, like with Perro Aguayo, you know, getting the win. And as you said, Will, is Konnan's last swan song, because at the time Konnan was the champion, the world champion there for AAA. Later on, he would drop that belt to Perro Aguayo in Mexico. I think literally a couple weeks after this.
It was like less than a week later.
Yeah,
because they didn't want him to drop the belt in the States. They waited for them to get back to Mexico for him to drop the title. This was essentially what does AEW call him? A title eliminator match or whatever, where if the guy pins the champ, he gets a title match. He beat Aguayo beat Konnan at When Worlds Collide, so that a week later back in Mexico, he would get the title shot. That was the little caveat why they didn't want the title to switch in the States. You know what I mean? Like, so that was their little bit of a, you're not going to get the title match here, but if you watch next week in Mexico City, by God, like, we got a fucking match for you. Like, because that's how they upsold the next match system as well, is because you saw this crazy cage match, and then they were going to a house show in a week or whatever it was, and they were like, go buy your tickets, right? Like, you know, it was good promoting. Like, Antonio Pena, good call, bud. Like,
he's a great promoter.
Yeah.
Smart man.
Chef's kiss. So as great, and seriously, folks, do yourself a favor. You can watch the whole entire show in its original broadcast on YouTube. It's great. Do yourself a favor. Go watch it. It's going to be the funnest 2.5 hours you have watching pro wrestling, I tell you. But as great as all this is, I think the most important thing, it is the aftermath. And we've got to talk about the aftermath of When Worlds Collide. The crazy thing is, here's the saddest story coming out of this whole thing, is literally, I think it was 17 days later after this show happens, we get one of the most tragic stories, I think, in pro wrestling. You get the untimely passing of Art Barr. It's just crazy. It's crazy to think, like, it was like, oh my God, this guy is like, as good as he was. And you just like, literally, this is it. He's about to get his moment. He's about to blow up. Because and you can see, like, on our previous episode we did on Art Barr, like the history of Art Barr and like kind of the trials and tribulations he went through.
And that's what sucks about his passing, is the trials and tribulations, because while in Mexico teaming with Eddie, Eddie said in a few interviews that Art was homesick, and his liquor and drug abuse had gotten really bad in Mexico, especially with the party scene that was in AAA at the time. And it just sucks that as soon as he got home to Springfield, that addiction got to him, and yes, his passing.
Yeah, his demons caught up to him, and I still say to this day, Art Barr, in my opinion, is the biggest what if in pro wrestling. Because God, man, if he would have, if he could have, the things he would have done. Oh man,
because he was in talks with all three companies about doing stuff when. Yeah.
Again, I said it. He would have been the greatest luchador to ever do it if he didn't pass away when he did. If he was still wrestling today, he would be the greatest luchador to ever do it.
Yeah.
And you see his influence now, not only with the moves, but like if you pay attention to like stuff Dominic wears, he's worn a lot of like Art Barr and Gringos Locos sweatshirts and t-shirts, and he pays tribute to Eddie and Art and their tag team in their past.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you see it in sports. It happens. It's rare, but it does happen every now and then. I think back to, and I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to remember his name, but the was it Lionel's, the basketball player there in the '80s, who was about
Lynn
to
Bass.
Lynn Bass. Thank you, Lynn Bass,
Yeah,
who literally was going to be like the next
drafted.
Michael Jordan, essentially.
Yeah,
And
got drafted by the
got
Celtics.
drafted by the Celtics, was going to be the top star, and literally about, I think, 2 weeks or whatever after he got drafted, he passes away. So it's just that is Art Barr. I mean, Art Barr, seriously, that man, the things he could have done. Oh my God. And the things he did do in a short span of time too is the thing. So
Yeah.
God bless him. R.I.P. Art Barr. But let's talk about all these stars start coming over and working here in the States. And I think it all starts really with ECW. Let's talk about that influx, Will, of these guys coming in, because you get and of course the centerpiece of it all is Konnan coming in, and then you get Rey Mysterio and Psychosis, and you see those guys working each other, and like just remember the crazy matches they had, and of course then you have Eddie Guerrero coming over and working for ECW, and even and Chris Benoit too working in ECW as well. Just what a time. I mean,
one of the things about, you got to remember about good old Paulie Dangerously in Philadelphia at the 2300 was he was great about, he was like, what's his name in the Game of Thrones? He's got his little birds everywhere. You know what I'm talking about?
That's
like,
a subject I do not know nothing about.
Oh no, I know who you're talking about. Bram, right? Like the Raven, the 3-eyed Raven,
no,
or whatever.
not with the Ravens. It was the dude he sat on the Queen's Court.
Oh yeah. The guy who, the bald guy who like doesn't have a
But
window.
it's like that sort of, because Heyman knew everybody. He took people from Canada, and he took people from the Indies on the United States, and he took these guys from AAA, and he brought them into ECW. And for a company that was known to be so hardcore, he was booking some of the most technical wrestling we would ever see. If you go watch some of the Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko stuff, and Chris Benoit, and some of these guys wrestling, they're the guys we talked about, your Pegasus Kids and stuff. These guys came up, and what we saw at When Worlds Collide, again, that was that jumping off point for everything that we would see in ECW, because that's where we got to see them on a weekly basis on TV after this. Because the guys who didn't go to WCW went to ECW, and the guys who didn't go to ECW went to WWF. And it was like they just started farming and coming straight in off of this. They started using AAA in a lot of ways, as bad as it is, but it's very WWE and WCW of them to do it. They use them like a farm system in minor leagues. They were letting Mexico develop these stars, and then they would offer them money to come work in the States. And it's very reminiscent of minor league baseball. They would let the guys develop in the minors, then call them up to the show when they were ready for them. And When Worlds Collide was that breaking off point where these guys running the promotions in the States realized you can take these international stars, get them over, bring them into your show and do it. And ECW is the perfect example of that, with how Paulie took people from Stampede, and he took people from CMLL, and he took people from AAA, and he brought them together, and he used them to fill that undercard of ECW, because in the main event was when they wanted people throwing chairs and going through tables and doing the ECW show.
Yeah, he did with Michinoku Pro.
Yeah.
I mean, he had an eye for wrestlers, man. I mean, he still does today.
He still does.
He's Paul.
Gabe Sapolsky running WWE Evolve is Paul Heyman's right hand. You know what I mean? Like, he still has his fingerprints all throughout wrestling. Paul Heyman was one of those guys.
Yeah. And if you got the credit of proclaiming yourself as a Paul Heyman guy, man, you were made in the world of pro wrestling. I mean, come on. One thing I remember a lot about that run too, with a lot of those guys working in ECW with Konnan especially, was the matchup he had against the Sandman. And the Sandman just caning the fuck out of Konnan. Like, he laid into him. It's brutal. Like, God, he beat the shit out of him. But I think the biggest thing we can say that, I mean, so much came out of this. Of course, the biggest thing is seeing these stars, but also really the birth of the cruiserweight division in WCW. I think. Because if you don't have this show, guys, do we have a cruiserweight division in WCW?
We don't have a cruiserweight division in WCW. I don't think we have a light heavyweight division in WWF.
Yeah. I don't think you get anything out of it. I think it really opened Bischoff's eyes to, okay, I need to have something different. I need to have something for the true blue, the hardcore, diehard pro wrestling fan. I've got the spectacle part of it, and at the time too, you think of WCW competing with WWF. I mean, it was just spectacle versus spectacle, right? But then it's like, let's dial into like this aspect of it, because these guys can work. This style can translate on television on a weekly basis. So why not have like something that sets you apart? And I think a lot of us will agree that that was one of our favorite things about WCW in this era. You can talk about the NWO all you want, but I mean, having that, like, the cruiserweights was the backbone of WCW during this time frame.
It was definitely my favorite part. I wasn't an NWO guy, so the cruiserweights and the middle card was always my favorite part of Nitro and Thunder.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Guys, let me ask you this, because this whole concept was fascinating with how Eric Bischoff and WCW kind of pretty much come in and produce this independent show, essentially, as you said, Will, earlier. Do you think we could get to a model, like, let's talk about WWE, for example, with what they're doing with ID and stuff, right? Do you think we could get to a model to where they are working with other independent companies in the sense of letting them have a presentation of like some of their big shows, and they kind of come in, like, look at it this way, like, let's say it's like a independent film studio, right? Like, say WWE let's say like WWE has this ID, whatever you want to call it, and it's all about like independent wrestling and stuff, but they essentially come in and kind of help produce and promote like their big show or something. And it's kind of like, if you think about it, it's the equivalent of like an independent film company that is like mass producing and coming in and buying like other like indie films essentially and like putting them out there. Do you think we can ever get to that point with the WWE?
No.
Simple.
And I hate to say that.
Yeah.
Simply put, no. WWE, in my opinion, is only interested in pushing the WWE bubble. What I think Worlds Collide was about was the coming together of three companies who needed each other. And I think WWE lives in a bubble where they don't think they need anyone except for WWE. And I think that is the one thing that gets in the way, because we see them working with TNA. I will give them that. They have great relationship with NXT, but what you're seeing there is NXT, their third brand, going against who is the equivalent of the number 3 brand in the country right now. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So what does that say what they think about the number? You see where I'm going with that? Like, WWE is not even sending over their best of the best for a cross-branded working relationship with the number 3 promotion in the country. They're using their developmental to help get over TNA. So in my brain, WWE won't get out of their own way to put a Seth Rollins in a match against, a Gabe Kidd. You know what I mean? Like, how amazing banger of a match that would be. But WWE won't get out of their own way and allow that to happen in 2025, I think, because they're worried about the bottom line as a bigger picture entertainment company. Whereas in 1994, these companies were functioning as wrestling promotions. That's the biggest difference now. WWE is not going to put the shareholders' money at risk to put over a big independent show. You know what I mean? That's Absolutely. Why we're getting the ID wrestlers, and that's why we're getting the NXT wrestlers going out on the indies now, is because WWE gets to stamp the WWE logo on Independence again, but they're still not risking their biscuit for it. They're keeping their big dogs at home to make sure they're safe and fed and watered, so when they need them, they're ready. That's the biggest reason why when Worlds Collide, if they do win Worlds Collide in 2025, it'll be NXT versus TNA. That'll be as close as we'll get to it.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair assumption. And I'm like you, I would love to see it. Man, it'd be so cool if they could do it. And here's the thing, though, it's baby steps, right? Because here's the stuff we're seeing now with them working with other promotions and stuff. That's shit we never dreamed would have happened. And hopefully, maybe some. I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetimes, in all honesty, but I would like to think at some point they get there. But let me flip the script here real quick. And that being said, do you think this is something like Tony Khan could potentially like pull off? Because I feel like the thing that hinders, and I don't want to go on too long of a tangent. I know we've gone long here, but I feel like the thing that hindering AEW and Tony Khan so much is they so desperately want to be like fucking like WWE. They're a contender. We're one of the, like what was so great about AEW when it started was just like, okay, this is something different. It's like back to the old days of pro wrestling. Do you think Tony Khan could ever pull something like this off by highlighting other promotions like that? Or you think it's going to be kind of like the same situation?
I think he already has. And the problem is he's not smart enough to realize he's already done it. And that was by organizing Wrestle Dynasty. Because you had Stardom, you had New Japan Pro Wrestling, you had Ring of Honor, you had AEW. That doesn't count the various independent promotions, or CMLL was also in there. That doesn't count the various independent promotions that were represented by having their champions work for those companies. Tony Khan is sitting at the cusp right now of having organized the biggest, Forbidden Door, and he calls it the Forbidden Door pay-per-view, and then all the AEW talent win. But essentially, Wrestle Dynasty and him being at the forefront of organizing that, he's already done a Worlds Collide pay-per-view. They just need to figure out how to make it consistently great. In my opinion, he's already there. He just doesn't realize he's already there. That's
interesting. That's a great take on it, because now that you say it, I mean, yeah, he kind of has pretty much done it. It's just a matter of like, it's like, well, you said it there too. It's like, well, it's always constantly putting over AEW talent. You got to have a balance, It can't just always be. And I definitely think if you go the WWE route, like it's like you say, they're in their own bubble, so it's going to be constantly WWE going over. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. In closing, gentlemen, I want to ask you this. Overall, what, in your opinion, do you think is the legacy of the When Worlds Collide pay-per-view and the impact it had on the world of professional wrestling?
A forgotten, groundbreaking, trailblazing pay-per-view that more people need to know and talk about.
It's Clerks.
Yes. Let's go.
Clerks. Yeah. Everybody's heard of it. Everybody has the general idea of what it is. Now go watch it and see it. Get the inside jokes. You know what I mean? Understand why Dante, makes the I'm not even supposed to be here today reference. Like, go watch Clerks. Go watch When Worlds Collide. You know who Rey Mysterio is. You know who Konnan are. Psychosis and Art Barr. Now go back and watch this and see who they were before. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So this ironically,
Kevin Smith, it's Clerks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Ironically, I was about to make a Kevin Smith analogy, but it was going to be Mallrats.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Salsa Shark. Dude. Oh, sorry. Oh man, like just everything about this show. Like we've said, like seriously, do yourself a favor, go back and watch this, because this is like one of the all-time classics, the all-time greats. I mean, seriously. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure you do this. I probably watch this show at least 2 or 3 times a year. I'll go back and watch it because it's just so damn good.
I have
I've
since I
watched it at
found it
least
on
once a
YouTube.
year
Yeah.
since I found it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like since COVID, I've probably watched it at least once a year. I've covered it on podcasts at least once a year when my friends find it and they're like, let's do this, let's talk about it, because it's so good. If you like independent wrestling and you like high flyers, do yourself a favor. I would say it's a 7 out of 10. You know what I mean? Like it's a good pay-per-view. It's not great, but again, the ripple effects that what come out of this pay-per-view make it so much better than a 7 out of 10. On surface level, just watching the matches, good matches with two really great ones at the end. And then you think about what happens after that. It takes a 7 out of 10 and it makes it 12 stars in the fucking Tokyo Dome. You know what I mean? Like,
The best way to put it, folks, is this: when worlds collide is the true definition of a cult classic.
yes.
Exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Because it's like a movie that you watch over and over again, and it grows on you, and it just gets better and better, and you just pick up little things here and there, and you're just like, God damn it, I love this shit. That's exactly what When Worlds Collide is. So seriously, do yourself a favor, y'all. Go and check out this show. Catch it on YouTube. Do whatever you got to do. But as we close up here on World Championship Wreckage, first off, I believe Dad Hat has the next pick for our topic, which we'll have to find out what that's going to be. I don't think he
just messaged me apologizing because he fell asleep.
Oh, Dad!
What I tell you, I told him. I said we were finishing up TNA, and I said, "Look, man, I'm going to be honest. If this TNA pay-per-view runs long and we don't even finish the pay-per-view until 11 o'clock, I said I might tap out because I said I know Dad Hat's ass is probably falling asleep already."
Yeah,
he literally just messaged me actually as we were talking.
Well, you have to tune in on our next episode to see what we're going to be talking about. As always, though, we got to end it with a plug-a-palooza. First off, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on and helping us talk about this show, which I know it means just as much to you as it does to us. But, my friend, tell us where you can find you.
MJ Duplessis 1992 on all social medias. You can catch me here on World Championship Wreckage with Queen's Court. While we're waiting for Raws to get popped up on Netflix, we're doing react shows. So me, Bree, and Husky reacting to different stuff in pro wrestling. You can also catch me on Cole TV every other Thursday for learning the ropes. And every once in a while, you can catch me on Off the Top Media and Rivet City Radio as the sixth man whenever Will needs me.
Yeah. Will, my good friend, please tell the people where they can find you.
First and foremost, as always, I want to say thanks to you guys for hanging out with me. I have been very distant and quiet in the content creation world. If you make sure you keep an eye over on Rivet City Radio, Nerdy News at 420 will be making a comeback this coming Tuesday at 420 Eastern Time. Botch Bots and Share Shots will be close behind it. We will also have a ton of YouTube exclusive stuff coming in April with movies Matt made me watch, where I'm going to be doing deep dives with the Warden Matt Ritter from Smacking It Raw, deep diving into some horror and comedy stuff. And then I'm going to have some RuneScape and some Fallout and some other video game stuff as we get ready to roll the new and improved Rivet City Radio out for 2025.
Oh, yeah. It's awesome. Can't wait, my friend. And, of course, you can find me over on Cole TV and under all of my socials under XLJ the OG. What's going on Cole TV, though? So, of course, you can always catch every Monday. We got Pro Wrestling 60 as we're on the road to WrestleMania. So much is going on right now in the world of pro wrestling, as you all know. So always tune in every Monday right before World Championship Wreckage's Netflix and Raw. Just saying. It's a good tag team combo. You can catch us recapping what happened in the world of pro wrestling, and then you can go watch Mike, Doug, and Michaela watch Monday Night Raw.
Netflix Raw, and we will be doing a Netflix Raw this Monday. Will, are you still down?
Yeah, for the 2:00 Raw.
Yes. We have Monday Night Raw since they're in Europe. Early Monday Night Raw, midday. So I will be with the Will Gray this week watching Monday Night Raw.
Nice. I'll be at work. But you can check that out, of course, every Monday for Cole TV as well as World Championship Wreckage. Right now on the channel, we do have replays up of our Season 3 premiere Friday night. Movie night is up now, where we got to watch the all-time classic Samurai Cop. Also, we got a brand new episode of The Hunt up now, too, where I was with the Best Gout Machine out in beautiful Burbank, California. And I got to check out a little place called Blast from the Past. It's pretty awesome. And speaking of Best Gout and our good friend Sienna Chanel were on hand at the Crypto Arena for AEW Revolution this past Sunday night. Their vlog is available over on Cole TV, so you can see what they got to see over the weekend. And upcoming, we also will have a brand new episode of I'm Your Huckleberry coming out this upcoming week. And on Learning the Ropes, you can catch a replay of that right now. We just had an amazing show the other night where we talked about the worst WrestleManias of all time. You can hear Mike and I go on a tangent for about 30 minutes talking about how much we hate WrestleMania 9. It's fun.
Fuck the Giant Gonzalez and fuck Hulk Hogan.
Fuck Terry Bollea, you piece of shit. But yeah, you can catch a replay of that. And then also, too, we got a lot of big stuff coming up in April, the month of April, because it's going to be stupid busy for us. Going to be out in Vegas for WrestleMania weekend. We're going to be all over the collective, baby. So we're going to have a WrestleMania week on Cold TV, followed by a collective week where you can see all the vlogs from that. And right after that, too, we're going to be in Indianapolis in our hometown for Squared Circle Expo 5. It is easily the biggest convention in the Midwest for professional wrestling. Speaking of them, they just had a big announcement today. One Will Ospreay will be making a rare appearance at Squared Circle Expo. So seriously, the weekend after WrestleMania, get yourself to Indianapolis because it is going to be one of the biggest conventions of the year for pro wrestling. But we'll have a fallout on that as well. But April is going to be a busy month for us. So that being said, gentlemen, thank you so much for tonight. Had a blast talking about this show. And as always, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And as we always do here on World Championship Wreckage, we got to end it with the one American Dream himself, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, baby, I got one more thing to say. Your gas tank is full. Your dipstick is in. Your windows washed. Y'all come back and see me again.